I do need to begin this morning by clearing up something that happened last week. You know what? Sometimes I make things a little complicated, makes things a little confusing sometimes. Last week we was talking about a man named Thomas Campbell and his statement that he used to bring about Christian unity. And he said, where the Bible speaks, we speak. Where the Bible is silent, we are silent. And last week we was talking about where the Bible speaks, we speak. And I just need to clarify something. I had a few questions this week, and so apparently I was as clear as mud, which, you know what, that happens sometimes. So, not talking about government, not talking about politics, nothing like that, just the biblical view, the biblical understanding that the church needs to stand for life. That life begins at conception, that we should stand against abortion, but at the same time, if we're going to speak where the Bible speaks, that also includes caring for those mothers, those expectant mothers, when they come in, not bad-mouthing them, not thinking bad about them, but truly showing God's love and mercy to them. And it's not just about, oh, let's get them through the birth of the child and celebrate. It's wrapping around that new family as well and showing all of them God's love. And so if that confused you last week, what I was talking about, now you can go back on YouTube and watch that video, and hopefully that clears up a little bit of the confusion that was had. If you weren't here and you're totally confused about what I'm talking about, go watch the YouTube video now, and you'll know what I'm talking about, okay? But this morning, we are going to get started, and I have something just a little bit fun. It's something we don't really do around here a whole lot. But I want to play a little bit of Name That Tune. And so Miss Alexa in the sound room, she has some clips she's going to play. This first one, I think, is about 6 seconds long. She's going to cut it off at that 6-second mark, and then I'm simply going to ask, what song was that? And you guys can shout out what you think it is. So it's not a competition. I don't have prizes to give out. You guys are adults, okay? You guys are adults. But I promise there is a connection to the message with doing this. But I want to give you the theme of what we're doing, and so this is TV theme songs is what the tune is. Okay? So it's not church songs, nothing like that. It's TV theme song tunes. Alexa, hit it. Bonanza. Good job, everybody. Now, we're going to try to see if you can follow directions. You're not going to shout out it until it's over, and then you can shout it out. Okay? We're warming up. All right, now this one's a little bit harder, a little bit trickier, I think, okay? Anyone hear that as a kid? Howdy doody. Hey kids, it's howdy doody time is the very next line. That's why she has to stop it when she does. So, all right. Now, that was the hardest one. Do the next one. What is it? I Dream of Jeannie. Good job. All right, next one. All right, what's that one? I Love Lucy. All right, here's actually the first one I looked up and the one I really wanted to do. Anyone know it? Yes, Andy Griffith. The Andy Griffith Show. All right, next one. What is it? Lone Ranger. All right. Now, this is the one that I might get kicked out of church for playing in the service. But here we go. Do this one. What is it? The Monsters. That's right. Oh, man. All right. We have one more, right, Alexa? We got one more? All right. Here we go. Star Trek. Star Trek. The original series. The original one. The real one. Star Trek. There we go. So the theme of that game was theme songs of TV shows, but more specifically, theme shows from the 50s and early 60s. Now, if for some of you out here like me who's only age 40 or below, you might be going, I've never heard any of those, and I apologize. This is definitely one of those things where when people say, Scott, you forget about my generation, that was definitely for you guys, okay? It really was. But man, you know, times were so much simpler in the 50s and 60s, right? We look back at that time frame with these rose-colored glasses, you know. We think of being able to go out and play all day, and parents never had to worry about their kids being kidnapped or anything like that. You know, kids went to school and they were there all day, you know, learning what 2 + 2 is and all this other stuff. As I was reminded just last week, they learned how to do math the right way, okay? But yeah, that's what we think of when we think of those 50s. Certainly, you know, not everybody had that Leave It to Beaver kind of experience. But that's what we often think of when we think of that era. And really, there's a reason we do that, and there was a thing going on in the 50s that was really building this. Now, you might not even know this. This might be all kind of brand new to you. But this started in the late 1800s, but it really culminated in the 50s, and that idea of a perfect society, a super safe society, that we are all slowly becoming better. That we are slowly taking those bad things and we're learning from them, and as a society, we are moving more and more towards like a utopian society. In fact, that last song we did, Star Trek, the entire premise of that TV show is all the nations on earth got their act together, they stopped fighting with one another, and they started working together. And they solved all of humanity's problems, and now they are going out exploring parts unknown. That's the whole premise of that TV show. Is that we as humanity have been able to progress to a point where all these things that we used to hate and things that didn't go, is this on? No, it's not. I'm just loud. I'm sorry. I feel loud today. But all these things were going on, and we were going to progress to become this great people because intrinsically we are good. And as time goes on, that goodness continues to come out, and we are able to separate all the badness in life. And, you know, we had something happen just before the 50s. It's called World War II. And you would think maybe the idea of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany and the Holocaust and all this stuff would have maybe put an end to this philosophical viewpoint of human progressivism, but it didn't. Because humanity was able to look to Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany and all that and say, look, those are uniquely bad people. We do not want that in society. That is not what a utopian society would look like. And so we was able to villainize, perfectly okay to do so. We were able to villainize that and use that as a foil for this idea that we are slowly becoming more and more good, and we are solving all these different problems. But my question today, and we're going to look at what Jesus has to say about it, is human progressivism, is this philosophic view the same as a biblical view? And Jesus actually addresses this in Mark chapter 7. If you have a Bible with you and would like to turn there, it's on page 713 of the Pew Bible, the blue book in front of your pew. But it's Mark chapter 7, and we are going to start in verse 14. Now, before we get there, today in today's society, we don't necessarily talk about a lot of human progressivism in this manner. And why is that? I think media as a whole, just the fact that we have all this world news and all this national news and news nonstop, has made it to where we start seeing more and more of the evil, more and more of the wicked. It's not just, oh, that's one thing that happened in this one location. It doesn't happen here. And we start hearing of all these stories where we would say these are normal, nice, good people, and then something happens and they do an absolutely heinous thing. Okay? One of the things that I usually go back to is the idea of human trafficking, the idea of kidnapping and selling them into slavery, usually the sex trades. Do you know where 83% of those people get recruited from? They get recruited from their family or their caregivers, from living partners, and from employers. So 83% of the people that are trafficked was actually put into that by somebody they knew. When we look at kidnappings, almost every kidnapping of a child has nothing to do with a random stranger that shows up and kidnaps them. It's somebody they knew. We think of men and women who work and maybe they're around a lot of money. And all of a sudden their bills can't be made for the month. Well, I'm just going to take a little bit. I'll put it back. Good intentions all. And all of a sudden that starts snowballing. The next month they don't have enough money. And the next month they don't have enough money. And all of a sudden it's breaking news about this big embezzlement scandal from your neighbor that you thought was a perfectly good person. And so we start seeing all these things and we start going, wait a second. Are we progressing? Wait a second. Are we really taking all this goodness and moving forward? And that's why we don't talk about human progressivism philosophy a whole lot anymore. A lot of that has been kind of debunked. They say, no, that's not really what's going on. Well, Jesus, 2,000 years ago, actually addresses this matter in Mark chapter 7. Starting in verse 14. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a man can make him unclean by going into him. Rather, it is what comes out of a man that makes him unclean." Now, after he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. "Are you so dull?" Jesus asked. "Don't you see nothing that enters a man from the outside can make him unclean? For it doesn't go into his heart, but into his stomach and then out of his body." In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. And Jesus went on saying, what comes out of a man is what makes him unclean. For from within, out of man's hearts, come evil thoughts and sexual immorality and theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and make a man unclean. And so as we read this, we start seeing what the biblical perspective is of this. Not that we are intrinsically good on the inside and we just have to release that. Did you know there is a whole industry that writes books that are based on this idea that we're intrinsically good and we have to find the right way to release that goodness? But that's not what the biblical viewpoint is. Biblical anthropology says that humanity is rotten at its core, and that is the core issue. That is the core problem. That each and every one of us has evil and wickedness inside us, that we are rotten, we are deficient. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. Now, I want to take a moment. In Mark chapter 7, verses 21 and 22, we have the list of vices, okay? This is not an all-inclusive list, but we have the list of vices that Jesus talks about. And I want to define a couple of these terms for us because some of these terms we don't use as much. And one of them I just think is a really interesting way that they word it in the ancient world. So up on this list, we see the word greed. And we see the word envy. Now, greed and envy have a lot of things in common with each other. You know, if you're greedy, you want and want and want. Normally, we're talking about possessions, that you want the object. Whereas envy, when we talk about envy, you're not being greedy for the object. You're envious. You're wanting what that other individual has. And it's not necessarily possessions, it could be. You could be envious of somebody because of their wealth. You can be envious of somebody because of their intellectual status. You can be envious of somebody for their family life, for their health. You can be envious for all of these different things. Now, in the ancient world, they actually rarely would use the word envy. In fact, the Greek word here that's translated is not envy. You know what this Greek word is? It's two words. It's an evil eye. A wicked eye. You have a wicked eye. You have an evil eye. That's what they translate as envy. Because this is an idiom, like it rains cats and dogs. It's not literally raining cats and dogs. It's an idiom. You know, Miss Lori might be able to tell you more about idioms if you need to know more about that. That's kind of her area, I think. But this is an idiom, and think about that. You're envious.